He was a billionaire, a man who once held the world in his hands until the night he came home. Inside his own mansion, he stumbled upon a scene no one could imagine: a woman bound to the floor, exhausted, desperate, and beside her, 2 children, twins with faces that looked exactly like his. That moment, everything shattered. Fame, power, trust, love, all turned to ash. He didn't know, was he the victim of a cruel scheme or the architect of his own tragedy? What would you do if the most brutal truth wasn't hidden in others but buried in the past? You chose to forget. Would you bury your emotions to protect the image you spent a lifetime building, or tear away the mask to find what's left of your humanity? Because this isn't just the story of a billionaire and a maid. It's a mirror showing the hidden corners of us all, where guilt, love, and compassion collide. And sometimes the most terrifying thing is the truth itself, but realizing that once you too looked away from someone else's pain. If you believe that every soul deserves a second chance, like, share, and subscribe, and join us on a journey to the deepest part of the human heart. The billionaire returns and unexpectedly witnesses a cruel truth: the Black Maid bound beside his twins. Rain poured down outside the Kensington estate like the heavens had burst open. Thunder rolled in the distance, echoing through the marble halls, mixing with the faint cries of a child from upstairs. Under the dim, yellow glow of a chandelier, a woman knelt trembling on the cold wooden floor. Her wrists were bound tightly to the bedpost with thick rope. Her curly hair hung in messy strands, and her swollen, red eyes looked like they held an entire storm within them. Amara Lewis, a black maid in her early 30s, forced herself to look up at the woman standing before her. Margaret Kensington, wife of billionaire Daniel Kensington, stood tall in a silk-white nightgown. Under the soft light, her face looked almost ghostly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You think you can just quit. Amara, you think you can leave this house because of a sick child?" Her tone was dry, cold. Every word landed like a nail being driven into a coffin. Amara tried to answer, her voice barely a whisper through her parched throat. "Please, Mom, my son is in the hospital. The doctor said he needs surgery right away. I only asked for half a day. He'll come back." Margaret let out a sharp, brittle laugh, like glass shattering. "Half a day. And who will look after my children? Or do you plan to take them to that filthy little place you call home?" She bent down, grabbing Amara's chin, forcing her to look up. "You people were born to serve. You stepping into this house was already a blessing." Amara's vision blurred not from tears, but from humiliation so deep it choked her. She just wanted to hold her son. But when Margaret nodded to the old butler, the ropes around Amara's wrists tightened again, cutting deeper into her skin. Upstairs, the Kensington twins, Ethan and Eliza, barely 2 years old, cried uncontrollably in their cribs. Their wails tore through the heavy air. Amara tried to inch closer. "Please, let me comfort them. They're scared." Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "Don't touch them. You're the reason they're frightened, not me." Her heels clicked across the floor as she left the room, the door closing with a hollow thud. The only sounds left were the rain, the wind, and Amara's broken breathing. She twisted her wrists, trying to loosen the rope. The fibers dug into her skin, warm blood trickled down, but she didn't stop. With every pull, she whispered, "Micah, Mama's coming. Even if it's just for a minute, Mama's coming." Outside, Lightning flashed, illuminating a small photograph hidden beneath a crib pillow. Amara and a laughing boy, no older than 8, smiling under the sun. Micah, her son, waiting for her in a hospital 10 miles away. The wind blew the curtain aside, and lightning reflected in Amara's eyes a mix of fear and fierce resolve. "Ethan, Eliza, hush now," she whispered. "Mama's here." Her trembling voice softened, enough to calm the twins. Their cries faded to whimpers. They didn't understand what was happening, only that something dark and heavy filled the room. Then came footsteps outside the door. Amara froze. The lock turned. The door creaked open again. Margaret returned, holding a glass of red wine, her gaze as cold as before. Still crying, she said, "Daniel isn't home. Amara, no one's coming for you." Amara lifted her head for the first time. Her voice didn't shake. "I don't need saving. I just need to see my son." Margaret's hand tightened around the glass. She threw it down. It shattered. Red wine splattering across the floor like blood. "You're a servant. Learn your place." The door slammed shut again. Darkness swallowed the room. Only the lightning framed Amara's face in fleeting flashes. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. Memories flooded back Daniel's kind smile on her first day. "You look like someone who knows how to care for children," he'd said. She'd believed it was a new beginning. Now she knew better. This mansion was nothing but a gilded cage, a place where dignity was a luxury she could never afford. Thunder cracked again. The twins screamed. Amara leaned forward, humming softly through her tears the same lullaby she'd sung to Micah every night. "Hush, little star. Don't you cry. Mama's here to sing tonight." Her voice broke halfway through, but somehow the twins fell silent. The room went still, only rain, breathing, and a mother's heartbeat filled the silence. Amara looked up toward the ceiling. Rainwater trickled through the cracked window, mixing with her tears. If silence has a price, she thought, then maybe it's time I speak. Outside, the storm raged on, but somewhere between the thunder and the wind, something inside Amara shifted from fear to fragile hope, a belief that justice, no matter how slow, would come. The scene fades out on Amara's eyes, reflecting the flash of lightning, a spark in the darkness. The rain didn't stop all night. When the first pale light of dawn crept through the window, Amara was still there, sitting against the bedpost, her arms numb from the ropes that bound her. The soft morning glow brushed over her pale face, cracked lips, and weary eyes. Yet somewhere inside those eyes, a small flame still burned. She had lived through many nights like this, nights when silence wasn't peace, but endurance. Years ago, Amara had been a preschool teacher in a quiet suburb of Bangor, Maine. The children adored her for her warm voice, for the way she knelt down to speak to them at eye level. But when her husband, Marcus, was killed in a car crash, she lost nearly everything: her home, her faith, and her smile. Still, she didn't break. She held little Micah, just 2 years old then, and left town to start over with nothing but her hands and her hope. Amara once believed that hard work could buy an honest life. But in this vast country, kindness doesn't always pay hospital bills. When Micah was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect, she worked wherever she could: CAFs, hospitals, nursing homes, until she found the Kensington estate. The pay was better, but she never imagined the cost: her dignity, stripped away one day at a time. Every morning at 4, Amara would rise, make breakfast, and prepare bottles for Ethan and Eliza. She remembered one morning when Margaret said, with a curl of disdain, "You cook well, Amara, but don't mistake that for belonging here." Amara had only smiled, lowering her gaze, hiding her hurt the way one hides an unhealed wound. She never told anyone about the time she was scolded for staring out the window too long, or the nights she scrubbed floors until dawn, while music from the upper hall drifted through the air. Inside that glowing mansion, she felt smaller than dust, yet she never complained. She simply stored away memories, the twins' laughter, the scent of milk in their hair, the sunlight spilling through the curtains each morning. Those were the things that reminded her she was still alive. A sharp sting in her wrist pulled her back to the present. The ropes had cut deeper, blood soaked through her sleeve. She tilted her head, pressing her cheek to the damp cord, breathing in the smell of old wood, blood, and tears, the scent of loneliness itself. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness, Micah's voice returned, soft as a whisper on the wind. "Mama, when are you coming back? At the hospital, all the other kids have their parents visit. I only have you." She had smiled then, promising, "He'll be back soon. Baby, just a little longer. I promise." That promise now cut through her like a knife. She remembered every coin she saved. Every night she walked home in the freezing air just to keep a few extra dollars. She remembered writing to the hospital, begging them to wait one more week for payment. All those struggles now locked within this cold, silent room felt meaningless. A sudden gust blew the window open. Rain lashed against her face, sharp and freezing. She looked up, letting the storm wash over her. For the first time in years, Amara felt truly angry, not just at Margaret, but at the world that had forced her to bow for so long. Angry at her silence. Angry at the fear that kept her quiet. Angry that no matter how hard she worked, people only saw a shadow. Then she cried, not in sobs, but quietly, like the rain seeping through the roof of an old house. "Micah, I'm sorry. I let them tie me down, while you were there waiting for me." She turned to the twins, now asleep to the rhythm of the rain. Her anger softened. They weren't to blame, they were just innocent souls, too young to know what cruelty looked like. Amara leaned forward, whispering gently, "Sleep well, little angels. I hope you grow up knowing how to love." Outside, dawn broke. Faint light slipped through the rain-streaked window and fell upon her face. She sat still, exhausted, but unbroken. In that moment, she thought of all the women like her, the ones suffering in silence behind grand walls, in cold offices, in crowded hospitals. Maybe everyone carries an invisible rope around their soul. And maybe, the moment you choose to stop bowing your head, that's when the rope begins to loosen. Amara closed her eyes. A single tear traced down her cheek, mixing with the dried blood on her wrist. But this time, it wasn't a tear of despair. It was the tear of someone beginning to understand that silence can be far more terrifying than pain. Somewhere deep within her scarred heart, a small sound stirred the voice of courage awakening. The rain had stopped. The first sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off the small photograph beneath the crib. Micah's bright smile unchanged. Amara smiled faintly, whispering as if he were right there, "I'm not home yet, baby, but I'm on my way, and this time, no one will stop me." She leaned her head against the bedpost, eyes closed. The morning light kissed her lips where a tired but unyielding smile had finally bloomed. Night had fallen deep over the hills. The rain had eased, leaving only the whisper of wind through the pine trees that lined Pinecrest Lake. Inside the vast mansion, every light was out. No one noticed the silver car gliding slowly past the wrought iron gates, its tires crunching softly over the wet gravel. Behind the wheel sat a man with a tired but resolute face. The headlights flashed across eyes that were sharp yet shadowed eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. Daniel Kensington, the tech billionaire, had just landed from Dubai after closing a deal worth hundreds of millions. He was supposed to return 2 days later, but something inside him, something he couldn't name, told him to come home. Daniel wasn't a man ruled by instincts. He believed in logic, order, control, but during the 14-hour flight, images of his twins kept haunting him, their laughter, their eyes, then their cries. A strange, gnawing dread had followed him all the way across the ocean. The car stopped at the front steps. Daniel grabbed his small suitcase and stepped inside. The house was eerily silent. No night guard, no footsteps from the butler. Only the heavy scent of rain-soaked wood and the steady ticking of the grandfather clock echoing in the dark. He called out softly, "Margaret, Ethan, Eliza? Anyone home?" No answer. His footsteps echoed through the hall, calm at first, then sharper as he passed the living room. A shattered wine glass lay in the middle of the floor. Red wine had dried into dark stains across the rug. Something twisted in his chest. He climbed the stairs. Somewhere above, a child's faint cry broke the silence. His heart pounded. He quickened his pace until he reached the door of the master bedroom. The crying grew louder now, mixed with the ragged breathing of someone barely holding on. Daniel gripped the handle. It was locked. He knocked hard. "Margaret, what's going on?" No reply. He slammed his shoulder against the door. It burst open with a crack. The hallway light spilled into the room, and for a long, frozen moment, Daniel couldn't move. Amara Lewis, the housemaid, was tied to the bedpost, her wrists raw and bleeding. Her clothes were soaked, her hair tangled across her face. In the corner, the twins lay in their cribs, crying weakly as if their tiny voices were pleading for help. The air reeked of wine, fear, and cruelty. Daniel stepped forward, stunned. "Amara, what happened here?" Amara looked up, trembling. Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to see my son at the hospital. She wouldn't let me go." Daniel knelt beside her, pulling a pocket knife from his jacket and slicing through the rope. When the last strand gave way, Amara collapsed against him, shaking. He saw the blood on her wrists and something inside him broke. "Dear God, who did this to you?" A voice answered from the doorway. Calm, cold, and sharp as steel, "I did. Daniel." Margaret Kensington stood there, her face pale but composed, a half-full glass of wine still in hand. She needed to be taught a lesson. She was going to run off and leave your children alone in the storm. "I did what was necessary." Daniel rose slowly. His voice dropped low, steady, dangerous. "Necessary. You tied up a woman like an animal. Is this how you treat people when I'm gone?" Margaret sipped her wine, eyes glinting. "She's not people. Daniel, she's a liar. I've seen the way she looks at you. Don't think him blind." Amara shook her head weakly, tears in her voice. "No, I swear. I just wanted to call my son. He's in surgery." Daniel turned to her, and in her eyes, He saw something raw and unmistakable, not fear of punishment, but the fear of losing what she loved most. He looked back at his wife. His tone was quiet, but every word landed like thunder. She's a human being. Margaret, not a possession. Margaret's laugh was sharp and hollow. A human being, she's a servant. Daniel, servants don't get rights. We pay them to obey, not to demand. For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then, slowly, he stepped closer. If money makes you think you can crush others beneath your feet, then maybe you should remember money can take everything away, too. Margaret's hand tightened around her glass. She threw it down. It shattered across the marble. You dare talk to me like that? Daniel didn't respond. He bent down, lifted the twins from their cribs. Ethan clung to his neck. Eliza pressed her tiny face to his chest, both of them trembling with exhaustion. He turned to Amara. Are you all right? Come with me, you need a doctor. Amara shook her head. No, sir, I can't. My son's still in the hospital. Please, I just need to go to him. Daniel held her gaze for a long moment. Then, without another word, he took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Come on, he'll take you there. Margaret's scream tore through the silence. You can't take her, Daniel. You'll destroy your reputation. He paused at the doorway, eyes cold as stone. My reputation means nothing. If I stay silent in the face of this. He helped Amara down the stairs. Outside, the rain had started again, soft, persistent. The car headlights cut through the mist as he opened the door for her. She sat quietly, hands trembling in her lap. The sound of the rain on the windshield filled the silence. Then, softly, she asked, Why did you come back tonight? Daniel gave a faint smile, eyes still fixed on the road ahead. I don't know, maybe because I heard someone calling me, in a dream. The streetlights flickered past, glinting across her face. Amara closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, let herself breathe. Outside, the night stretched endlessly ahead, a road glistening with rain. Inside the car, two people sat bound by fate, one who had lost his faith, and one who had just found hers. The car disappeared into the fog. Back in the mansion, Margaret stood at the window, watching the taillights fade into the darkness. Her face was pale, her hand trembling slightly, but in her eyes a spark of something dangerous had begun to burn. Cut to black. The storm has ended, but the reckoning has just begun. Dawn broke, casting a pale light over the roof of the Kensington estate. Sunlight filtered through crimson velvet curtains, scattering across the polished wooden floor, but it couldn't chase away the lingering chill that clung to every corner of the house. That mansion, once a symbol of wealth and prestige, was now just a gilded shell, slowly cracking from within. Daniel stood by the window of his study, staring out at the mist-covered garden. He hadn't slept a minute. After taking Amara to the hospital and ensuring she was safe, he had driven home in silence, his mind in turmoil, like shards of glass spinning inside his chest. He couldn't shake the image of Amara's eyes when he cut her free. They weren't just afraid. They were the eyes of someone who had been broken so many times that she no longer believed she had the right to feel pain. It was an expression that forced Daniel to confront a question he had long avoided. What kind of man had he become to let that happen in his own home? He gripped his coffee cup tighter, the heat biting into his skin, but he didn't let go. Since founding Kensington Technologies, he had learned to control everything: stocks, markets, the press, everything except the people under his own roof. The door opened. Margaret walked in, calm, composed, immaculate in a silk-white dress. Her voice was soft but sharp enough to cut. "You're still up?" Daniel didn't turn. "No." "Tell me, Margaret, why did you do that to Amara?" Margaret gave a light, dismissive laugh. "She deserved it. Can't you see she's been playing you?" "Daniel, pretending to be helpless. Women like her know how to make men feel sorry for them." Daniel turned slowly, his eyes cold as steel. "You're talking about a mother whose child is dying in a hospital? You call that manipulation?" Margaret's smile faltered for an instant, but she steadied herself. "You don't understand. People like her, they live off pity. I did what I had to do to protect you, to protect our family." Protect, Daniel echoed, or control. The air grew thick between them, heavy enough to drown in. Margaret took a slow breath, keeping her composure. "You've changed, Daniel. You used to be stronger. Everything I've done for this family. If you can't see that, maybe you should take a long look at yourself." Daniel said nothing. He just looked at her, the woman who had once stood beside him at galas, in magazine spreads, in front of flashing cameras. Now there was nothing left between them but silence and the wreckage of what used to be love. What he saw in Margaret's eyes now wasn't affection. It was power disguised as pride. His voice came low and steady. "Do you know where the first crack in a house begins?" Margaret. Not from the wind, not from the rain. It starts with the voices that no one listens to. For a brief second, her mask slipped, hurt flickered across her eyes. But she turned away quickly, hiding it behind her familiar, icy poise. "You're tired. Get some rest. Daniel, he'll handle this. My way." She left, closing the door softly behind her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel stood motionless, torn between reason and conscience. Logic told him to keep the peace for the sake of appearances, the children, the empire he'd built, but something deeper, older, refused to stay quiet any longer. That afternoon, Daniel went to the hospital. Amara was still in her bed, her wrists wrapped in white bandages. When he entered, she tried to sit up, her voice trembling. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." He raised a hand gently. "You don't need to apologize. I just wanted to know if you're okay." Amara nodded faintly. "Thank you, sir. But my son, Micah, he's not well. The doctors said he needs another operation soon. They'll find a way. I just need more time." Daniel sat down beside her. "You don't have to do this alone anymore. Amara, he'll take care of the expenses not out of pity, but because it's right. No one deserves what happened to you in my home." Tears welled in her eyes, but she tried to hold them back. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just a maid." Daniel's reply was quiet but unwavering. "No, Amara, you're a person, and that's something I and maybe this whole world have forgotten." At those words, her restraint broke. She cried softly, not out of despair, but release. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as the help, not as a shadow, but as a human being. Daniel watched her, guilt twisting deep inside him. He had never realized that his wealth, the thing he'd built to protect his family, had become a wall that blinded him from the pain of others living just a few rooms away. That night, back at the mansion, Daniel stood alone under the porch, The sky was bruised with clouds again. Thunder rumbled somewhere far off. He knew another storm was coming, not from the sky, but from within these walls. In his mind echoed Amara's trembling voice. I just wanted to go home to my son. Such a simple plea, yet it struck deeper than any accusation. Because Daniel suddenly understood, inside this golden mansion, how many people had truly found their way home to anyone. He looked up at the second floor. Margaret's window glowed faintly in the dark, and he knew from this moment on, nothing would ever be the same. The first crack had formed, and no luxury, no silence, could hide it any more. Daniel drew a long breath, his hands tightening into fists. For the first time in years, he felt the urge to fight not for profit, not for reputation, but for truth. And deep down, he sensed it. The worst of the storm had yet to come. At that same hour, Amara opened her eyes in the hospital room. Outside, rain began again, tapping gently against the window. She whispered into the darkness, "Micah, Mama's walking through the storm now. My boy." Her voice was small, but warm like a lullaby. The bandages on her wrists still burned. But deeper than that was the ache in her heart, a wound where pain and courage had begun to intertwine. That wound would bleed for a long time, but this time she wouldn't run from it. Because Amara finally understood. Only it had been raining for 3 days straight. Relentless sheets of water cloaked the Kensington estate, as if even the sky had grown weary of hiding what it knew. Daniel sat alone in the old library. The golden glow of a desk lamp cast soft light across his face, revealing lines of fatigue that seemed deeper than ever before. On the table before him rested an old pocket watch, the one he had given Margaret on their 10th anniversary. Its hands had stopped. Frozen at the moment, everything changed. 17, The hour he came home and the world inside this house began to fall apart. A faint knock broke the silence. Daniel looked up, his voice rough. "Come in." It was Amara. She stepped inside, her slender frame wrapped in a beige coat. Her wrists were still bandaged, but her eyes, they were different now. No longer lost, but calm and steady, like someone who had seen beyond fear itself. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping Micah." Daniel's lips curved into a weary smile. "How is he?" "The surgery went well. He's weak, but the doctors say he'll recover." Her voice trembled, each word carrying gratitude laced with quiet sorrow. Daniel nodded. "Good. You should rest too." Amara turned to leave, then hesitated. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Mr. Daniel, there's something I need to tell you." He looked up. Her gaze drifted toward the rain-streaked window. "I knew Mrs. Kensington before I worked here." Daniel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Amara swallowed hard before continuing. "Years ago, I worked at a women's support center for victims of abuse. She came there once, not as a victim, but as a donor. I saw her only once, right after I'd given birth to Micah. She was there that day with you." Daniel froze. The memory rushed back, a charity event, cameras flashing, the smiling crowd. Yes, he remembered a young woman in the corner, holding a baby. He had seen her, but never really looked. Now, the pieces fell together. "You're saying Margaret knew you?" Amara nodded. "Yes, and I think that's why she hated me. Maybe she thought I came here on purpose to get close to you. But I swear, I didn't even know who you were. I just needed a job." Her voice broke. Under the dim light, tears rolled down her cheeks. Not tears of fear, but of exhaustion from carrying truths no one had ever believed. Daniel sat silently for a long time. Something inside him cracked soundless, invisible, but deep. For years, he had lived in this house of secrets without ever trying to understand the people buried within them. The door burst open. Margaret stood there, no knock, no hesitation. Her gaze flicked between them, cold as winter steel. "I knew it," she said quietly. "I knew she'd tell you." Daniel rose. "Margaret, is it true you knew Amara before she worked here?" Margaret smirked. "Of course. I'll never forget the people who made me feel ashamed." Amara met her eyes steady, unflinching. "I never meant to shame you. I only asked for kindness." Margaret let out a brittle laugh. "Kindness. You think that exists in this world?" "Amara, not in mine. My world has no room for the weak." Daniel's voice cut through, low and sharp. "Then your world is already crumbling. Margaret, can't you see it?" She turned to him, and for a fleeting second, the mask cracked. Her voice wavered, trembling with something that almost sounded like fear. "You think I want to be this way? Daniel, you have no idea. Every time you left, I sat in this empty house, terrified you wouldn't come back. I hated being alone, and she made me feel small. Daniel, a poor woman with nothing, and yet she had peace in her eyes, something I lost a long time ago." Amara said nothing. In that moment, she no longer saw a cruel woman, only a shattered one, still fighting her own shadow. Silence filled the room. Outside, the rain fell harder, like a sigh from the heavens. Daniel spoke quietly. "Margaret, we're all haunted by the past, but none of us are meant to live there forever. You can still choose differently." Margaret looked up, her eyes glistening. "The past," she whispered. "The past doesn't die, Daniel. It stays, in every dream, in every drop of rain. It's the one thing that never leaves." Her voice broke. The hand holding her wine glass trembled. Red liquid spilled down onto the wooden floor, a crimson scar in the lamplight. Without another word, she turned and walked out. The echo of her heels faded down the long, empty hall. The door closed. Daniel and Amara stood in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Amara spoke softly. "Is right, the past doesn't die. We just stopped daring to look at it." Daniel's reply came low, steady, resolute. "Then I won't let it bury us." His eyes burned with something new, the spark of a man who had fallen but was ready to stand and fight for what was right. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He went through old files, reports, letters, bank statements under Margaret's name. Each document sliced open another secret. And then he found it. A photograph, a charity event, the Women's Center, Margaret, smiling, Amara in the corner, holding baby Micah, and Daniel standing between them. The photo slipped from his hand, landing face up on the desk. His heart pounded. A cold realization crept through him. This had started long before he ever knew it. Lightning flashed outside, casting his face half in light, half in shadow. The rain began again, steady and unrelenting. But in that room, something else had awakened, something with a pulse, a purpose, something called the truth, and it had just begun to breathe. When you face your pain, can you truly begin to heal? It had been raining for 3 days straight. Relentless sheets of water cloaked the Kensington estate, as if even the sky had grown weary of hiding what it knew. Daniel sat alone in the old library. The golden glow of a desk lamp cast soft light across his face, revealing lines of fatigue that seemed deeper than ever before. On the table before him rested an old pocket watch, the one he had given Margaret on their 10th anniversary. Its hands had stopped. Frozen at the moment, everything changed. 17 Mom. The hour he came home and the world inside this house began to fall apart. A faint knock broke the silence. Daniel looked up, his voice rough. "Come in." It was Amara. She stepped inside, her slender frame wrapped in a beige coat. Her wrists were still bandaged, but her eyes, they were different now. No longer lost, but calm and steady, like someone who had seen beyond fear itself. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping Micah." Daniel's lips curved into a weary smile. "How is he? The surgery went well. He's weak, but the doctors say he'll recover." Her voice trembled, each word carrying gratitude laced with quiet sorrow. Daniel nodded. "Good. You should rest too." Amara turned to leave, then hesitated. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Mr. Daniel, there's something I need to tell you." He looked up. Her gaze drifted toward the rain-streaked window. "I knew Mrs. Kensington before I worked here." Daniel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Amara swallowed hard before continuing. "Years ago, I worked at a women's support center for victims of abuse. She came there once, not as a victim, but as a donor. I saw her only once, right after I'd given birth to Micah. She was there that day with you." Daniel froze. The memory rushed back, a charity event, cameras flashing, the smiling crowd. Yes, he remembered a young woman in the corner, holding a baby. He had seen her, but never really looked. Now, the pieces fell together. "You're saying Margaret knew you?" Amara nodded. "Yes, and I think that's why she hated me. Maybe she thought I came here on purpose to get close to you, but I swear I didn't even know who you were. I just needed a job." Her voice broke. Under the dim light, tears rolled down her cheeks, not tears of fear, but of exhaustion from carrying truths no one had ever believed. Daniel sat silently for a long time. Something inside him cracked, soundless, invisible, but deep. For years, he had lived in this house of secrets without ever trying to understand the people buried within them. The door burst open. Margaret stood there, no knock, no hesitation. Her gaze flicked between them, cold as winter steel. "I knew it," she said quietly. "I knew she'd tell you." Daniel rose. "Margaret, is it true? You knew Amara before she worked here?" Margaret smirked. "Of course. I never forget the people who've made me feel ashamed." Amara met her eyes, steady, unflinching. "I never meant to shame you. I only asked for kindness." Margaret let out a brittle laugh. "Kindness. You think that exists in this world, Amara. Not in mine. My world has no room for the weak." Daniel's voice cut through, low and sharp. "Then your world is already crumbling. Margaret, can't you see it?" She turned to him, and for a fleeting second, the mask cracked. Her voice wavered, trembling with something that almost sounded like fear. "You think I want to be this way? Daniel, you have no idea. Every time you left, I sat in this empty house, terrified you wouldn't come back. I hated being alone, and she made me feel small. Daniel, a poor woman with nothing, and yet she had peace in her eyes, something I lost a long time ago." Amara said nothing. In that moment, she no longer saw a cruel woman, only a shattered one, still fighting her own shadow. Silence filled the room. Outside, The rain fell harder, like a sigh from the heavens. Daniel spoke quietly. Margaret, we're all haunted by the past, but none of us are meant to live there forever. You can still choose differently. Margaret looked up, her eyes glistening. The past, she whispered, the past doesn't die. Daniel, it stays, in every dream, in every drop of rain. It's the one thing that never leaves. Her voice broke. The hand holding her wine glass trembled. Red liquid spilled down onto the wooden floor, a crimson scar in the lamplight. Without another word, she turned and walked out. The echo of her heels faded down the long, empty hall. The door closed. Daniel and Amara stood in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Amara spoke softly. She's right, the past doesn't die. We just stopped daring to look at it. Daniel's reply came low, steady, resolute. Then I won't let it bury us. His eyes burned with something new, the spark of a man who had fallen but was ready to stand and fight for what was right. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He went through old files, reports, letters, bank statements under Margaret's name. Each document sliced open another secret. And then he found it. A photograph. A charity event the Women's Center. Margaret, smiling. Amara, in the corner, holding baby Micah, and Daniel standing between them. The photo slipped from his hand, landing face up on the desk. His heart pounded. A cold realization crept through him. This had started long before he ever knew it. Lightning flashed outside, casting his face half in light, half in shadow. The rain began again, steady and unrelenting. But in that room, something else had awakened something with a pulse, a purpose, something called the truth, and it had just begun to breathe. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy and thick, as though it still carried a storm it hadn't yet released. Inside the study, the weak light from a single desk lamp fell upon the old photograph lying on the table, a photo of 3 people. Though only 2 still recognized each other, Daniel sat motionless for a long time. His eyes lingered on Amara's face in the picture, young, gentle, and tired. Beside her, Margaret, radiant, smiling, glowing under the flash, and between them, himself smiling, unaware that his smile stood between 2 worlds, one of truth and one of lies. He whispered to himself, "All these years, which truth have I really lived in?" The next morning, Daniel called for the butler. "Bring me all the files from the Women's Center, every donation Margaret made." The old man hesitated. "Sir, she told us no one was to touch those." Daniel's tone was calm, but final. "I'm telling you now, I'm the one giving orders." Hours later, thick folders lay across his desk. Daniel opened them one by one, each page cutting deeper into his memory. There was Margaret's name, her donations, her signatures. But under the recipient list, one name appeared again and again, Amara Lewis. His hand froze. He turned the pages faster. In one note, scrawled hastily in blue ink, he read support for single mother related to Marcus Lewis accident, 2009. Daniel's heart stopped. Marcus Lewis, Amara's husband, the 2009 accident, he remembered. That year, Margaret had been behind the wheel. A minor collision, they said, quietly settled. He had signed the paperwork himself to protect the family name. Now the truth hit him like a blow. Margaret had killed Amara's husband, and he, Daniel Kensington, had buried it. His chest tightened. Guilt rose like a tide, cold and suffocating. He stood abruptly, the file shaking in his hands, and stumbled into the hallway. Margaret was there. She stood by the tall window, the pale morning light tracing her face. Her eyes were calm, too calm. Daniel's voice broke as he spoke. It was you, wasn't it? She didn't turn. You know now. Do you? He stepped closer, his voice trembling. You killed Amara's husband. You knew, and you said nothing. You let her work in this house, raise our children, live under this roof knowing what you'd done. Margaret turned to face him. Her smile was thin, weary, warped by the weight of years. Of course I knew, Daniel. I've known every day since that night. But do you know what's worse? It wasn't just me who killed him. It was you. You signed it away. You erased it. If I'm guilty, then so are you. The words landed like thunder. Outside, the rain began again, soft, relentless, as though the sky itself was mourning. Daniel sank into a chair. There was nothing to deny. It was true. All these years he had lived in a house built on silence drinking wine, watching his children laugh, never knowing he was standing on someone else's grief. He thought, how many of us hide behind money, call it justice, and convince ourselves it's enough? A part of him wanted to scream, to destroy, to confess everything. But another part simply sat there listening to the sound of his own guilt. Margaret spoke again, her voice low, drained. Do you think I didn't want to tell the truth? You never listen. Daniel, you only hear what makes you feel clean. You blame me, but you were never any different. Tears fell down her cheeks not from rage, but from someone who had carried her sin too long. Every time she looked at me, I saw myself a woman who lost everything because of someone else's mistake, and I hated her because she reminded me of the person I could never forgive. Her voice cracked. I killed a man, but I died with him that night. Daniel. Daniel stared at her. The anger was gone. So was the judgment. Only emptiness remained. He rose, slowly, and spoke quietly. You're right. I share your guilt. But our worst sin wasn't what we did. It was our silence, and I won't stay silent anymore. Her eyes widened, fear, disbelief. What are you going to do? Tell the truth, he said simply, to Amara, to the world. If justice means anything at all, it has to start with us. Margaret's laugh broke half a sob, half despair. You think confession will make her forgive you, or make you feel better? You're a fool, Daniel. Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a war one that bleeds the soul dry. She stepped closer, trembling, her hand pressed to his chest. Do you really think she'll ever look at you the same way again once she knows Daniel didn't answer? Because he already knew the truth, she wouldn't. But some truths still needed to be spoken, no matter the cost. That afternoon, Daniel went to the hospital. Amara sat by Micah's bedside, holding his small hand. The light through the window touched her tired face kind, but worn thin. When she saw him, she smiled faintly. Micah wanted to thank you. Daniel placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Amara, I didn't come for thanks. I came to tell you the truth. Her smile faded. The look in his eyes said everything before he even spoke. The accident in 2009, he began, voice unsteady. The driver was Margaret, and the man who signed the settlement papers was me. Silence. Even the heartbeat monitor seemed to slow. Amara stared at him, her lips parted, her breath shallow. Then, quietly, tears began to fall, not with a cry, but with a stillness that felt endless. So it was you, she whispered. It all began with you. Daniel bowed his head. I'm sorry. No words can ever undo it. But you deserve to know. You have the right to know. She turned away, gripping her son's hand tightly. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, softly, almost to herself, she spoke. I used to think that if I ever stood face to face with the people who destroyed my life, I would hate them. I'd curse them. But now, I just feel tired. Too tired to hate. She looked at him again, eyes filled not with fury, but with something heavier. I won't forgive you, but I won't hate you either, because hatred would make me like you. Her words struck deep cutting, yet somehow healing at the same time. Daniel lowered his head, tears spilling onto his trembling hands. In that moment, something fragile, something almost holy began to take root between them. A faint, flickering belief that even in darkness, one could still choose light. Outside, the rain had stopped for good. The last light of day poured through the window, painting the small hospital room in gold. Micah stirred, blinking awake. He looked up at his mother, then at Daniel, and smiled. Mama, the rain's gone. Right, Amara brushed his hair gently, smiling through her tears. Yes, baby, the rain has stopped, but inside their hearts that rain, that storm had only just begun to fade. After days of cloud and fog, the first soft light of morning spread across leaves still wet with dew. The garden outside the hospital swelled with the damp scent of earth, the sweetness of fresh grass, and the first bird song of the day. Amara sat on a stone bench, cupping a paper coffee gone cold. A breeze lifted a few loose strands of her hair. There were shadows under her eyes, but her gaze had changed, calm, as if, once pain finally breaks open and spills everything it has, what remains is a single thing, the quiet of the soul. Inside the room, Micah slept, thin and bandaged, his breath even. He smiled in his dreams, maybe imagining a day without rain. Amara drew a long breath. For the first time in years, her chest felt light, not because it was over, but because she knew this, she would no longer lock herself inside silence. The hospital doors opened. Daniel stepped out. He wore a pale gray shirt, stripped of the glossy aura from magazine covers. Fatigue lined his face, but in his eyes there was something new, a small light, fragile, but true. He stopped in front of Amara and said, "I've handed everything to the police. It'll be handled by the law." Amara didn't look at him. She only asked, softly, "Will they arrest her?" "Maybe," he said, "but I don't want you to see it as revenge. I just want to end the cycle of silence." She nodded. "I understand. No one should live in the dark forever. Not me and not her." Daniel fell quiet. He studied Amara's sun-browned face, startlingly peaceful in the new morning. "Do you hate me?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Amara pressed her lips together. "Hate." She looked toward the sunlight filtering through the trees. "I used to think hatred was the only way I could keep going. But forgiveness isn't for other people, it's for yourself. I don't want to carry that weight the rest of my life." Daniel lowered his head. "Thank you. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known." Amara smiled faintly. "No, I've just learned how to survive." The simplicity of it caught in his throat. Meanwhile, at the Kensington estate, the police arrived. Margaret sat in the living room, strangely composed. Light poured through the tall glass panes and caught the mirror behind Harriet's reflection, showing a solitary woman. Hair loose, a glass emptied in her hand, like the shadow of a past that refused to leave. When they read her rights, she didn't resist. She only said, "I know. I've been waiting for this," before she left. She glanced around the room that had once held laughter and now only carried the sound of the wind. She murmured to no one in particular. This was never a home. It's only where people learn how to lose. The butler stood in the corner and bowed his head. No one spoke another word. That afternoon, Daniel returned to the hospital. Amara was reading to Micah. The boy's eyes grew wide. "Mama, will Mr. Daniel stay?" She looked at Daniel and smiled, a little shy. "He has work." Daniel smiled back. "But this is the one job I don't want to walk away from." They all laughed small, quiet laughter, but enough to push back the gloom that once surrounded them. Daniel sat and watched them. In that moment, he realized regret can't erase the past, but it can be the start of something real. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he felt truly alive. 1 month later, the Kensington estate was sold. The news churned through the media, but Daniel gave no interviews. He spent his time elsewhere at the Women's Support Center where Amara once worked. He funded a new foundation, Micah's Light Foundation. Its purpose to assist women who've survived abuse and to provide medical support for children in need. At the opening, Amara stood beside him in a simple dress, her hair tied back. When asked why she agreed to partner with him, she said, "Because I believe it's never too late to do the right thing, even for those who've been wrong." The room went silent. Many people wept, not because her words were tragic, but because they carried a truth everyone recognizes. We all fail. Only those who face their failures have any hope of saving themselves. That night, after the ceremony, Amara stepped onto the balcony. The sky was astonishingly clear. Daniel joined her, holding 2 cups of hot tea. "Will you stay?" he asked. She smiled. "I don't know. I might go back to Maine. Micah needs somewhere quieter." "What about me?" he blurted. Amara turned to him gentle. "Steady. You have a whole world to mend. Daniel, I have a small one to protect. But maybe we'll meet again, when we're both truly at peace." The wind shifted. They stood in silence, watching the eastern sky begin to pale. Somewhere inside the small room where Micah slept, moonlight touched a photo taken earlier that day, 3 figures captured side by side. A man who once carried guilt, a woman who once lost everything, and a child proof that the future can still shine. The frame tilted in the breeze, glinting over a tiny inscription carved along its edge. "No storm lasts forever. What matters is who we become when the rain is gone." As dawn rose, Amara whispered into the wind, "Marcus, do you see everything's finally washed clean? And I am still here." Her voice was small but steady. A quiet smile bloomed like the first light of day. "The story doesn't end in tears. It ends in peace, the kind you earn only after you dare to face the past and say, 'I made it through.'" Autumn had come. The new community center bearing the name Micah's Light Foundation had been running for 3 months. Each morning, sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, gliding across pale tile floors. Children's laughter echoed through the halls, blending with the soft voices of volunteers. Amara stepped through the door carrying a basket of red apples. She set it on the table and smiled at a young nurse. "Beautiful day. Isn't it? It is, Ms. Amara. It's been a while since I've seen you smile like that." Amara touched her cheek lightly. She hadn't realized how much she'd changed her smile, no longer tinged with sorrow, but calm, the kind that comes only when one has finally made peace with the past. Across the city, Daniel sat in the therapist's office. Sunlight filtered through the wide window beside him. "I used to think money could fix everything," he said quietly. "But I've learned only courage can do that." The therapist smiled. "You've already shown courage, Daniel." He shook his head. "No, Amara did. She taught me forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about choosing not to let pain rule your life anymore." On his desk sat a photo: Daniel, Amara, and Micah at the foundation's opening ceremony. The noon light fell across it, and the faces within seemed to glow with life. December. The first snow of the season fell soft and white, like a promise. Amara and Micah had moved to a small house in rural Maine, nestled beside a pine forest, with a frozen lake behind it that mirrored the pale sun. That morning, Micah ran outside, shouting, "Mama, it's snowing. I'm going to make a snowman." Amara laughed, pulling her coat tighter. "Be careful. It's cold." His laughter rang across the wide, open space, blending with the whisper of the trees. She watched him, her heart filling with something rare and familiar peace, a peace she once thought she'd never feel again. By noon, the sound of a car drifted from the road. Micah's eyes lit up. Uncle Daniel's here indeed. A black SUV stopped at the gate. Daniel stepped out, carrying a brown paper-wrapped box. "Hello, you two," he said warmly. "I brought a small gift for Micah." The boy tore it open. Inside was a small, gleaming pocket watch, old but polished. On the back, engraved words read, "For the time we still have." "You're giving this to me?" Micah asked. "It was your father's," Daniel said. "I kept it for a long time, but it belongs with you now." Amara froze. She recognized it instantly, Marcus' watch. The police had returned it after the accident, but she'd never had the strength to touch it again. "How did you find it?" she whispered. Daniel's voice softened. "Margaret sent it before her sentencing. She asked me to tell you she's sorry." Silence hung in the air. Amara stood still for a long moment, the cold wind lifting her hair. Then she murmured, "Maybe we all need forgiveness, even the ones who've gone too far." Daniel's eyes glistened. "Thank you, Amara, for teaching me how to be human." That evening, the three of them sat by the lake, watching the sunset reflected in the melting ice. The sky burned with orange and gold, thin clouds drifted like threads of wool. Micah sat between them, holding the pocket watch, tracing its hands as they moved. Amara turned to Daniel. "Do you think the path we're on is enough to make up for what we've done?" He smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. "No one ever truly makes up for everything. But if, at the end, someone can say, 'He tried, maybe that's enough.'" Amara nodded. "Yes, that's enough." They sat quietly as wind rippled across the lake, scattering gold light like tiny coins. Night fell. Amara sat at her window, writing, "Dear Marcus, I'm not angry anymore. Life doesn't give back what it takes, but it gives us the chance to begin again. Micah's grown. You know, he has your bright eyes and a heart far kinder than either of ours ever was. Maybe the light we search for isn't somewhere out there. Maybe it's in the people we hurt and who still choose to love us back. I hope, wherever you are, you can see us. We've walked through the dark, and we're still here." She folded the letter and set it by the window. Outside, snow fell slow, glittering beneath the moon. In the next room, Micah slept soundly, the pocket watch ticking beside him. Downstairs, Daniel sat by the fire, reading the road home with a cup of tea in hand, a faint smile on his face. 3 lives once broken now quietly whole again. None of them said it aloud, but they all knew salvation doesn't fall from the sky. It begins when hearts choose to open. Moonlight shimmered across the lake, so bright it looked as though someone had lit a lantern at the end of the road. 1 year later, New York shimmered beneath the glow of Christmas lights. Golden garlands wrapped the streets, glass ornaments hung from evergreens, and the soft strains of Silent Night drifted through the city air. At Rockefeller Plaza, a memorial was being held for victims of domestic violence, an annual event sponsored by the Micah's Light Foundation. This year, Amara was invited to speak. She stepped onto the stage, her beige coat fluttering in the winter wind. From the podium, her eyes swept across the crowd hundreds of faces, women, children, men all listening in stillness. Her voice rose, gentle but resonant. I once believed that if we were strong enough, we could overcome anything. But strength doesn't mean being untouched by pain. We are strong because we have fallen and still stood again. Silence followed deep, breathless. Then a swell of applause broke through, mingling with the distant toll of church bells. From the back row, Daniel watched quietly, eyes glistening. The woman on stage was no longer the housemaid he once pitied, but a guide, someone who had walked through darkness and learned to lead others out. After the ceremony, Amara found him among the crowd. "You didn't tell me you'd be here." She smiled, her eyes warm. "I wanted to just listen," Daniel said softly. "Your words made me realize I can still do more." She tilted her head. "You still haven't learned how to rest, have you?" He chuckled. "Old men rarely do. The heart never quite settles." They both laughed. Snow fell gently between them. Daniel reached into his coat and handed her an envelope. "This is for you. I've signed over the rest of my assets to Micah's Light. After this year, I'll step down from the board." Amara froze. "You don't have to." He shook his head. "I do. It's the only part of me that can still mean something. I built an empire, but in the end, the only thing I want to keep is a little light." His voice softened. "You can't take money with you when you go, but if I could take one thing, I'd want it to be peace." Amara said nothing for a long time. She looked at him, the man who had once been powerful, proud, untouchable, now simply human, learning to let go. "Do you think," she asked quietly, "you'll ever be forgiven?" He smiled faintly. "I'm not waiting for forgiveness. I just want to leave in truth." That night, they walked through Central Park. Snow blanketed the paths, and lamplight shimmered on the frozen lake. Daniel told her stories of his early years when he'd built his first company with an old computer and a boyish belief that technology could save the world. "But I learned," he said, "what the world really needs isn't machines, it's hearts that still burn." Amara listened in silence. A strange ache filled her chest, tenderness, sorrow, respect for a man who had finally found himself just as his journey neared its end. Before they parted, Daniel said, "He'll be leaving New York for a while, heading to Maine, maybe to be near you and Micah, but I won't intrude. I just want peace." Amara smiled. "Maine is beautiful in spring. You'll like it there." Months later, the news broke. Daniel Kensington had passed away in his sleep. He was 67. There was no lavish funeral. By his request, he was buried in a small cemetery near a pine forest in Maine, beside an old oak that overlooked the lake. The day of the burial was clear and cold. Sunlight streamed softly through the trees. On his gravestone, a simple line was carved: Daniel Kensington, a man who learned to see people again. Amara laid a bundle of white flowers upon the grave. Micah stood beside her, holding the small watch he'd worn since that winter. "Mama," he asked, "do you think Mr. Daniel dreams when he sleeps?" She knelt down, smiling gently. "Yes, sweetheart, he's dreaming of the light." Micah gazed up at the sky, eyes wide and bright. "Then he's not scared any more." "Right." "No," Amara whispered. "People are only afraid when they haven't lived truthfully, but once they have, there's nothing left to fear." By the time they left, the sun was setting its red light spilling over the lake, painting the world in fire and gold. Amara paused and looked back. A soft breeze lifted a few white petals from the bouquet, scattering them across the water. She clasped her hands and murmured, "Thank you, Daniel, for teaching me that kindness is never too late." Micah tugged her hand. "Mama, let's go home. I'm hungry." She smiled through her tears. "Yes, love, let's go home." They walked away, their silhouettes slowly fading into the pine forest. Behind them, the sunset burned, not dying, not fading, just becoming part of the sky. And somewhere, perhaps, Daniel was watching, smiling because for the first time in his life, he finally belonged to something real. 20 years later, on the wall of the Micah's Light Foundation, a black and white photograph still hung in a place of honor: a silver-haired man, a woman, and a smiling boy standing by the lake. Beneath it, an inscription read, "No one is born perfect, but everyone can choose to live with kindness." Micah was now in his 30s, tall, calm, carrying the quiet strength of those who've known both loss and love. He was preparing for his first university lecture, The Value of Compassion in the Age of Technology. Before stepping onto the stage, he paused by that photograph, fingertips brushing the faded faces of Daniel and his mother, Amara. He smiled as if light from the past had traveled through time just to illuminate the path ahead. The auditorium was full. Micah walked to the podium without notes, without slides, just silence. Then a steady, resonant voice. "I was born in darkness in the mistakes and pain of others. But it was in that darkness that I saw the light not from the world outside, but from people who chose to love even after they were broken." The hall went utterly still. Micah spoke of Daniel, a man who carried guilt and washed it clean by living truthfully to his last breath. He spoke of Amara, a woman who chose forgiveness, not for the one who wronged her, but for herself, so she could be free. Then his voice deepened, filled with quiet conviction. If my mother could forgive the one who destroyed her happiness, and if Daniel could learn how to be human again at 60, then none of us are ever beyond hope. Applause thundered through the room, yet Micah waited. He spoke once more, softly. "We can't live twice, but we can live once in a way that lights the path for someone else." The audience rose. Some cried, men and women alike, because in his voice there was no grandeur, only the plain, human truth of compassion. That evening, Micah returned to the small house in Maine, the same home where he and his mother had once begun again. Amara was old now, her hair silver white, but her smile still gentle as spring sunlight. He placed a bouquet of wildflowers on the table. "Mom, I gave my first talk today." Her eyes shone. "Were you nervous?" He chuckled. "Of course. But when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear Daniel saying, 'Just speak from the heart, the rest will follow.' Amara looked out the window. Snow was falling soft, white, endless. He would be proud, she said quietly. He once told me you're the flame he left behind. Micah fell silent. He looked down at his wrist, the old pocket watch still ticking, its rhythm steady and alive. He touched it gently, hearing in it the heartbeat of three souls who had walked the same road, pain, remorse, forgiveness, and life renewed. That night, Amara told him about a dream. I saw the lake again, she whispered. Daniel was standing on the far shore, waving. Your father was beside him, both smiling, calling me over. Micah held her hand. Maybe they're waiting to walk with you toward the light. She smiled through tears. Maybe, but not yet. There are still people who need to see the light first. They sat by the fire, the flames flickering across the walls like moving memories. Neither spoke again, but both understood to live isn't merely to survive, it's to pass on the light you carry. 3 years later, one spring morning, Amara passed away in her sleep as gently as a petal falling, on the small wooden table by the window, beside a cup of tea gone cold. Micah found a letter addressed in her familiar handwriting. My dearest Micah, by the time you read this, it'll be where no shadows reach. Don't grieve. We only borrow the light for a little while, then pass it on. I once thought life was punishment, but now I know it's the journey of learning how to love. Live, Micah, love. And when you see someone lost in the dark, don't turn away, light them a small lamp. That's how he'll keep living inside you. Mom. Tears fell as Micah read, but when he finished, he smiled. Outside the window, sunlight broke through the morning mist, filling the room with gold. He rose, opened the door, and stepped out onto the porch. Wind rustled through the pines, whispering softly. The lake shimmered under the light. I promise. Mom, he said, voice trembling but sure. The light won't die. Years later, still, people would speak of a small school in Maine, a refuge for orphaned and abandoned children. Its name, Amara's Haven. Above the wooden doorway, carved into old oak, were the words every child there could recite. The light we give never dies, and H sung ta trao, ha kung bao gi ti ti. Children played in the yard. Adults came to learn, to heal, and every night, through the windows of that house, warm light poured into the dark. They said that on calm nights, if you stood by the lake and listened closely, you could hear the faint laughter of a woman and a man, and the voice of a child calling, Mama. No one ever saw their shapes clearly, but everyone felt something undeniable. The light was still there, passing from hand to hand, from heart to heart, and that was what remained of humanity. There are pains only time can soften and mistakes only forgiveness can heal. The story of Daniel, Amara, and Micah is more than the journey of three strangers. It's a mirror for all of us, reminding us that somewhere deep inside, each of us holds a shadow, and each of us is searching for a light to guide the way. Daniel, the man who once had everything, but lost himself in the pursuit of power. Amara, the woman who suffered deeply, yet chose forgiveness over hatred. Micah, the child born amid brokenness, who grew into a flame that carried love forward. They taught us that wealth can buy recognition, but never peace. Forgiveness isn't forgetting it's free in your own heart, and even the smallest light can pierce the darkest place. Life doesn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes it only asks that we pause, listen to one another, say, I'm sorry while we still can, and hold someone's hand when they lose their way. Because in the end, what remains isn't success or failure, but how we lived with love, with compassion, with grace. If this story warmed your heart, if you saw a part of yourself in Daniel's eyes, in Amara's sorrow, or in Micah's hope, then leave a like. Share this story and subscribe to walk with us on this journey of humanity and healing. Because sometimes just one story is enough to rekindle the light in a heart that's lost its way.